The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Beloved actor Morgan Freeman has been accused of sexual harassment and inappropriate behavior by multiple women. We didn't even get a chance to cover this because it broke at the very end of last week, and then we were away for the long weekend. And he is fighting back, and he has put out a 10-page letter, well, his attorney has on Morgan Freeman's behalf. And it says that Morgan Freeman did not do any of the things he is accused of having done, that these are all bogus allegations, and he's demanding a retraction and an apology from CNN after they reported on these allegations last week. And in a statement to ABC News on Friday, he said the report devastated him, that it's not right to equate horrific incidents of sexual assault with misplaced compliments or humor, and basically not denying that he knows the women in question, not denying that he has had contact with the women in question when it comes to speaking to them, but saying that misplaced humor and misplaced compliments and attempts at humor is all that they were, and that there was never anything beyond that in terms of wanting to make women or actions that should have made women feel uncomfortable or disrespected, that it was not his intent. And now he is straight up saying CNN put out a malicious report with falsehoods, sleight of hand, and an absence of editorial control, and that it amounts to journalistic malpractice. A spokeswoman for CNN responded and said that the accusations made by Morgan Freeman's lawyer are disappointing and difficult to reconcile with his own public statements in the aftermath of the story. CNN is standing by its reporting and will respond forcefully to any attempts by Freeman to intimidate them out of covering what they say is an important issue. Like with all of these things, I don't immediately distrust accusers. If it is revealed that there are specific reasons to be skeptical, like, for example, that this is something that was brought to political operatives rather than directly to law enforcement, for example, there's some sketchy stuff around the accusations against former New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. Okay, well, that might make me say, let's figure out exactly what's going on here. My default is not to distrust the accusers, and there's no particular political reason why you would hear about this from accusers of Morgan Freeman at this time. So I guess I'm reserving judgment while acknowledging that Morgan Freeman is forcefully denying all this stuff, while not denying that he actually has had contact with these women. But I'm not at a place at all, Pat, where I'm ready to say I don't believe the women.
Right. I certainly believe the women too, but I feel a little bit mixed about this because he is being accused of sexual harassment. You know, he was commenting on women's appearance, I believe, in the workplace. And obviously he shouldn't do any of that stuff. You know, he would even call them inappropriate jokes. And maybe they happened years and years ago where that thing was looked past a little bit more.
Yeah, the circumstances have changed, I think, when it comes to workplace humor, right?
I just feel as though when history looks back at this Me Too chapter, we're going to end up tying all these names together. And we really shouldn't, because, you know, what Harvey Weinstein did is not the same thing as what Aziz Ansari did, and what Bill Cosby did is not the same thing as what Morgan Freeman did. So I really don't want to defend the guy, but is he becoming in some ways a victim of the time because he's wrapped in with all of this? Or should we just stop short and, you know, not give him any benefit of the doubt?
I don't think it's disrespectful to women that are accusing Morgan Freeman to say that if we're not talking about sexual assault, right? If we're talking about comments about, like, I wish I was there to a pregnant woman that he worked with, or looking people up and down in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable, it's a perfectly reasonable conversation to have as to whether that does or doesn't constitute sexual harassment by today's standards, and whether the standards of 5, 10, or 15 years ago would have seen that differently. We're not talking about sexual assault that is physical, right? And I think that your point is very well taken, Pat, that we need to distinguish that that's not what we're talking about. And I think when you bring up the Aziz Ansari story, which we did a couple months ago, it's another important thing that what Bill Cosby did, drugging women and having sex with them, what Harvey Weinstein is accused of doing is not the same thing that Morgan Freeman and Aziz Ansari are accused of. And what Louis C.K. did, without saying it's not bad, I mean, it's horrible what he did, is also a different thing than what Morgan Freeman is accused of and what Harvey Weinstein is accused of. I think that that's the main point.
Right, and you know, I feel like this will be as far as this case goes because he's being accused of sexual harassment, which to my understanding is not a crime unless it becomes stalking or, becomes assault or something greater.
Yeah.
So he's just going to be tried in the court of public opinion. He'll never really have his day. He'll never be charged with anything. So I think, if there was a time to assess what went on, it's here and now. And obviously he apologized, he's fighting back. But it's disappointing in a way because, he's one of these actors who was looked up to for so long, right? The voice of God in Bruce Almighty. And it's just a sad story. It really is.
Yeah, I have always admired Morgan Freeman as an actor, but based on the interviews that I've seen him do, I've always also sort of thought of him as a dick, as a condescending dick. So I'm actually not surprised. There is some entitlement that and sort of pomposity that is, I think, part of the personality of people who do the things that he's accused of having done. And so I was not in any way surprised when I read about this. I guess that's what I'm saying, and I'm curious whether people in the audience agree with me on that. Dolphins are some of our sort of closest animal, what would we
Companions?
call them? They're not really companions, but when it comes to mental capacity, dolphins are, along with some of the great apes, the closest thing to humans that exist in the animal kingdom, I guess is what I'm saying. And scientists are working with dolphins at a marine park near Paris to measure how animals feel about their lives in captivity. In other words, sort of, can we evaluate happiness, and that's happiness in quotes, from an animal's perspective? And dolphins are the species that they were looking at. And what they found was that marine mammals like dolphins anticipate interacting with familiar humans. They found that there is a bond there that was detectable between these captive dolphins and the humans that they regularly interact with, that they anticipated it and that it was actually good for their mental state, for their emotional happiness. And the study's being published in the journal Applied Animal Behavior Science. It was a 3-year project to measure dolphin welfare in a captive setting. And what they found was that the dolphins' posture indicates how they're feeling and that they feel better when humans that they recognize are there. Trainers that come and play with the dolphins, add toys to the pool, can work with the dolphins and sort of allow the dolphins more freedom when it comes to sort of a day-to-day type of situation. And the dolphins would do what's called spy hopping, meaning looking above the surface of the water and in the direction that the trainers would typically approach from. They would increase their level of activity in the pools. They would spend more time at the edge. So this is an interesting study because it shows us that, okay, there is a bond that exists across species between dolphins and humans humans can actually improve the lives of dolphins relative to other dolphins in captivity that don't have bonds with humans. But isn't the best thing for the dolphins not to be in captivity at all? That's sort of what I go back to when I read the study.
Yeah, and you got to wonder if this is tied to food too, right? The dolphins at least subconsciously recognize that humans can offer them their existence by, allowing them to be fed, and even playing with them is good, I guess, because it makes them more curious and keeps them entertained because they are intelligent creatures, so I'd imagine they could get bored. But if, contrast this to orcas who are held in captivity, I have to imagine those things are miserable. I mean, SeaWorld had that breaking story about how horribly they obtain and treat the animals, and one orca actually killed one of their trainers.
Yeah.
So it could be a size issue because orcas are so massive and held in these like small swimming pools, whereas dolphins have a lot more free range to go about and swim. But ideally, we would not hold these animals in captivity, and I think we have to make zoos and aquariums a thing of the past eventually.
Yeah, I agree. And I've been reading quite a bit about animal rights, and there's a really good, very short introduction on animal rights that I think is interesting. And, I'm sort of boringly in some ways a most things are a gray area type of person on most issues in life. Like, I think that there are very, very few actual black and white issues. Like, for example, public beheadings in Saudi Arabia, that's a black and white issue. That's bad. We shouldn't do it. There's no sort of like culturally relativistic argument that I've ever heard that makes me think, oh, under X circumstances, it's okay to behead people in Saudi Arabia, right? That for me is a black and white issue. Most things I find to be gray areas, and there is a big school of animal rights that is the sort of sliding scale model, to put it colloquially. And it says that it is not, there's a lot of, in all philosophy, there's often a search for universalism, universality, universal rules that are either always A or always not A. And I actually think there's a lot to the sliding scale model, which sort of recognizes that an ant is not the same as a bird, is not the same as a dog, is not the same as a dolphin. And when we think about that, I think that there is really no case to be made that if you believe in the gray area of animal rights, that the line would put dolphins on the other side of the line. I can't imagine how anyone could get to that conclusion with both dolphins and whales. And that's sort of where I am on it. And I think that these studies only sort of further confirm basically things that we already know about the complexities of dolphin emotions and social lives. Hey, we've talked about gas prices a lot over the years, and I've tried to point out the hypocrisy that exists with gas prices. Gas prices are a political football, sort of like the debt. And when you want to criticize a president that you don't like, you blame them for high gas prices. And when gas prices are high under a president that you like, you say the president has nothing to do with gas prices, right? We see it time and time again. And unfortunately, some Democrats are doing this now. Chuck Schumer, senator from New York, is ripping the White House over high gas prices. He's saying Trump's decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal is directly leading to higher gas prices. And as I mentioned before, most of the stuff that a president does not directly influence gas prices. Pulling out of the Iran deal actually is an action that could influence gas prices. Although I think that it's too soon for gas prices to have been influenced, because pulling out of the Iran deal would influence oil prices, which then trickles down through the refining process and supply and demand of oil to impacting gas prices. I don't even know that we can actually link current gas price increases to the Iran deal thing. Maybe oil prices have started to react as a result of that. But we've talked about how we're at the time of the year when gas prices do tend to go up, right around Memorial Day. I think that this is kind of a cheap thing. There's so much to criticize Trump about. And if the Iran deal pullout is a factor in gas price increases, it's only a tiny fraction of those gas price increases. And I just think that it goes against Democratic credibility when criticizing Trump for other things. And I'd rather they not do this, Pat.
It's not the best messaging. And Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and some other lawmakers went to the most expensive gas station in D.C. to hold a press conference and blame this whole thing on Trump. I just think you're right that there are many other things to attack Trump on, and this is going to look pretty cheap. At the same time, if gas prices get up to, say, $4 a gallon again, and you can make those direct connections to a trade war or to sanctions or pulling out of the Iran deal, maybe at that point you can start making the argument. But, you know, I think one layer is whether or not this is an accurate accusation, and the other layer is whether or not it's politically effective. And I think it fails on both fronts, at least right now.
I don't know if it's, I genuinely, at this point, am so desensitized to the entire gas price political football that I genuinely don't know whether it's politically effective. Like, maybe it is. Maybe Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are smart politically to do this because it does play well. I don't actually know, but you're saying you don't think it's politically effective.
No, not right now. You know, I don't know if Democrats were able to market this effectively back in, 2007 when gas prices were super high.
Under Bush,
when oil was over $100 per gallon.
Per barrel.
Per barrel. But there were also so many other things going on at that time, like the housing crisis. I mean, the whole economy was shattering, and that's what collectively Democrats went after.
Yeah, I admit that I'm not the right person to evaluate whether it's politically effective or not because I'm so ingrained in this issue as a political football. It strikes me as not a great one, but I may be wrong, and maybe this is a brilliant political move. Send me your thoughts. That is it for today's bonus show. New bonus show and new regular show tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.